Do you know that most people don't really understand their constitutional rights? They'll tell me things like, the cops never read them their Miranda warnings. Shouldn't the case be thrown out? And the answer is no. That's not what Miranda versus Arizona stands for. Or they'll tell me that their vehicle was searched without a warrant, without realizing that the Supreme Court has enumerated a number of exceptions to the warrant requirement under the Fourth Amendment. So today we're going to start a 10-part series and discuss 10 most important landmark Supreme Court decisions in criminal law that every citizen should know. And unsurprisingly, we're going to start with Miranda versus Arizona, a case from 1966, and half a century later, people are still misquoting and don't quite understand it. So how are we going to do this? We're going to talk about the case first. I'm going to briefly give you a description, and then we're going to talk about the myths and misunderstandings of each case. So today, part 1, it's Miranda versus Arizona. But before we go on, I want to thank you for watching me here on YouTube. Welcome to Lost Dash channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to shop.lostdash.com and check out the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts, hats, stickers, pins, and a variety of other items. And if you're watching this series, type in the code 10cases and you will receive 10% off on all the merchandise. Thanks for watching.
Quick message from Lost Dash. Are you charged with a crime? Or do you want to know your rights if stopped by police? Watch California attorney Anton Vialtsin discuss legal cases from the Supreme Court, Ninth Circuit, and California state courts on the Lost Dash YouTube page. Anton has handled hundreds of federal and state criminal cases, has an in-depth knowledge of the law, and has the best mustache ever. Subscribe to the Lost Dash YouTube page. That's LAWSTACHE.
We begin part 1 of this series with Miranda versus Arizona, a Supreme Court case from 1966. Mr. Ernesto Miranda was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona for kidnapping and rape. After 2 hours of interrogation, he signed a written confession. But later he claimed that he never received his Miranda rights. Well, he didn't call them Miranda rights. He didn't know that those rights will later be called after him. But the case goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court says that the 5th and 6th Amendment guarantees the right to a lawyer and the right to remain silent, and those rights need to be given to you. Well, let's do it one more time. These are the rights. You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have a right to an attorney, and if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided to you. Those are now known as Miranda warnings. The Supreme Court says those warnings have to be given to you prior to custodial interrogation. So that's in essence what Miranda versus Arizona stands for. Here are some of the misconceptions, misquotations, misunderstandings of this case. Let's begin with number 1. If police don't read Miranda, the case gets thrown out. That is not true. There's a number 1 thing, and that's false. The case does not get thrown out. Only the statements that you make to the police, if you were never Mirandized, those statements cannot be used against you in court. But other evidence, physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, DNA evidence, anything else other than those statements can and will be used against you in court. Number 2, police must always read Miranda rights at the time of the arrest. That is again false. It's not like Cops, that show where every person got Miranda rights. No, at the time of the arrest, the officers do not necessarily need to read you your Miranda warnings. Miranda only applies during custodial interrogation. So first, let's define custody. Custody means you're not free to leave. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're in handcuffs, but a reasonable person would not leave from the situation. An interrogation means that the officers are eliciting incriminating statements. They're questioning you and trying to get incriminating statements out of you. That is interrogation. So again, Miranda only applies during custodial interrogation, which means that if you're booked, arrested, but never questioned, well, Miranda does not need to be given to you. Again, this is custodial interrogation. Police only need to read you those warnings during custodial interrogation. Number 3, anything you say before Mirandized is inadmissible. Well, again, false. Not everything. Spontaneous statements can be used against you, which means that if you're freely talking to the police prior to being Mirandized, those statements will be used against you later on. Police can talk to citizens without always giving them Miranda warnings. So if you're being arrested, do not confess to any crimes. Don't talk to the police. Remain silent. Number 4, Miranda created the right to remain silent and the right to a lawyer. That is not true. Those are your constitutional rights. The Fifth Amendment gives you the right to remain silent. The Sixth Amendment guarantees a right to a lawyer. It comes from the Constitution. Miranda simply said that those rights have to be given to you, or you have to be informed about those rights prior to being questioned in custody. Number 5, if you don't explicitly say you want a lawyer, silence is enough. Again, not true. You have to be clear and unambiguous. You have to say, I want a lawyer. Or you have to say, I want to remain silent. Silence itself is not enough. So don't think just because you're remaining silent that the officers will not continue speaking to you. Number 6, Miranda rights apply everywhere, even outside of the United States. That is false. This is your constitutional rights under the United States Constitution and applies here within the United States. If you're questioned by foreign authorities, those statements might later come in here in the United States because we don't know whether the other country has similar constitutional protections. Their constitution might not require that. So this applies only in the United States. Number 7, police can't question you without Miranda. Of course they can. They can question you without Miranda. They just can't use those statements against you in court if they forget to Mirandize you or if they fail to give you the proper warnings. But remember, some of those statements can be used against you. For example, in impeachment. If you're the one that opens the door and speaks and testifies in court, the prosecution can in fact use those statements against you in court as impeachment. Number 8, Miranda protects you from everything you say. That is not true. Again, we're talking about custodial interrogation. So we made a full circle here. We're back to custody and interrogation. Your statements to undercover officers or confidential informants, those are not protected. So again, the most important things you can take away from this video is that Miranda versus Arizona stands for custodial interrogation and the statements that are derived from that interrogation. So the only thing gets thrown out are the statements, and only if you were not provided warnings under Miranda versus Arizona during custodial interrogation. I hope you enjoyed this first video in the series. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the Lost Hash channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to shop.losthash.com and check out these Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts, hats, stickers, pins, and other items. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, your reward is the promo code 10 cases to receive 10% off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 2 of this 10-part series.